First of all, country music was not like it is now. Country music was down your nose.
From spending approximately 3 years in prison to becoming one of the most influential country music stars, Merle Haggard's life is an example of how a person could find purpose in the strangest places. After his death at 79, there was a mysterious discovery in his garage that left everyone in shock. Join us as we uncover what was found in his garage. The shocking recovery. Long before Merle Haggard passed in 2016, there was an unfortunate event in his life that became one of his legacies. On the 14th of July, 1981, Merle Haggard was gearing up for a show in Houston, Texas, with a trusty truck loaded to the brim with roughly $175,000 worth of his instruments and sound gear. Just hours before the concert, the truck was stolen from the motel parking lot where the crew was staying. Merle did not allow the theft to derail the performance, so he borrowed whatever instruments he could. After the show, he continued to search for it, and what he found left everyone amazed. The very next day, July 15th, the stolen truck was found abandoned, containing only 2 large speaker cabinets, while everything else was gone. The thief, while attempting to pawn the stolen instruments, met a serious challenge. He realized that much of the gear was custom-made and highly identifiable, and law enforcement could trace it back to Merle. Bit by bit, the instruments and sound gear were recovered. Merle spoke about this event on stages, narrating how his customized branding saved him from such an immense loss. Even after his death, his family recalls that incident when they see the truck packed in his garage. But that's not all. Merle Haggard's life is full of such intriguing experiences. Let's find out more as we explore his journey through life. Merle Haggard's early life. Merle Ronald Haggard was an American country music singer, songwriter, guitarist, and fiddler. Born on the 6th of April, 1937 in Oildale, California, a rural neighborhood near Bakersfield, he arrived in a world marked by hardship and upheaval. His parents, Flossie Mae "Nay" Harp and James Francis Haggard, had fled the ravages of the Dust Bowl and the Great Depression in Oklahoma after their farm burned down. They joined many others in the westward migration seeking a new life. Life was no longer going as planned for the Haggards. They initially lived in an apartment in Bakersfield, but soon his father converted a boxcar into a home on an Oildale lot. It was in that humble boxcar that Merle was born in 1937. Despite the hardship, Merle's family continued to live in love, working hard to attain the quality of life they desired. But things took a heartbreaking turn in 1946 when his father passed away due to a brain hemorrhage. Merle was only 9 years old when this unfortunate incident happened. The impact echoed through his life and songs. Left to raise the children alone, Merle's mother became a bookkeeper, striving to support the family. His older siblings, Lowell Haggard and Lillian Haggard, became key influences in his life. Merle recounted how his brother James taught him the guitar and how his sister took care of him like a mother would. Thus, music became his solace after his father passed. Despite being surrounded by people who genuinely love and care for him, Merle was a rebellious child from the beginning. His teenage years were marred by truancy, stealing, and frequent offenses against the law. By age 13, he was shoplifting and writing bad checks, leading to multiple stays in juvenile facilities. At one point, he even ran away to Texas with a friend named Bob Teague, hopping freight trains in search of freedom, but ultimately being returned for crimes. Merle escaped from detention more than once. His defiance made him a constant escape artist, which earned him a stay in places like the Preston School of Industry, a reform facility. Despite the difficulties, Merle continued to learn how to play the guitar using his brother Lowell's instrument and the limited records the family could afford. He drew early musical inspiration from Bob Wills, Lefty Frizzell, and Hank Williams. A defining moment arrived when Merle attended a Lefty Frizzell concert. After Merle sang along backstage, Frizzell invited him on stage to perform. This memory was what confirmed his passion for music. Merle continued to navigate through life's challenges until 1957 when he was faced with a severe financial strain. He made a decision that will alter the course of his life forever. Merle attempted a burglary at a roadhouse, which ended in his arrest in jail. He tried to escape from jail 17 times, which landed him in bigger trouble. On the 21st of February, 1958, he was transferred from jail to San Quentin State Prison. Life behind bars wasn't easy. He got involved in gambling and brewing and landed in solitary confinement. During this period, he was placed in a cell right next to a very famous prisoner named Carol Chessman. Carol Chessman was on death row at the time and had gained worldwide attention because he wrote books proclaiming his innocence while awaiting execution. His case was heavily covered in the news, so being housed next to him was a big deal to Merle. He also witnessed the execution of another inmate known by the nickname Rabbit. Those two experiences made him realize how easily his own life could have ended badly if he had continued on his current path. From that point on, he resolved to change his life, focusing on staying out of trouble and working toward a future in music instead of crime. He earned a high school equivalency diploma, took prison jobs, and performed in the prison band. His life changed profoundly when he heard Johnny Cash perform at a prison concert. Cash's raw honesty inspired Merle to redirect his life toward music. After 3 years behind bars, Merle was released in 1960 and returned to Bakersfield, determined to forge a respectable path. Career journey. In Bakersfield, Merle demonstrated a passionate commitment to his music, playing his guitar in local clubs and backing up for music stars. He also played in bars like the Blackboard Cafe, often for little more than tips and beer. He covered Lefty Frizzell, Hank Williams, and Bob Wills, who are heroes he'd idolized in his youth. In a short while, he found the courage to start testing out original songs. His time in prison had sharpened his ability to tell a story, and his deep, resonant voice carried the weight of someone who had lived the lyrics. It was around this time that he began working with Wynn Stewart, a prominent figure in the Bakersfield sound. Stewart recognized Haggard's potential and let him use his band when they weren't on tour. He also offered him the song Sing a Sad Song, which was released in 1963. The song reached number 19 on the country charts, putting Haggard's name on the radar for the first time. This might be seen as luck, but Haggard's persistence, work ethic, and determination not to waste his second chance brought him thus far. During this period, he found a lifelong ally in Fuzzy Owen, a steel guitarist and club owner who became his manager. Owen's belief in Haggard was unwavering, and his loyalty would prove vital as the stakes grew higher. By 1964, Haggard signed with Tally Records, releasing singles like My Friends Are Gonna Be Strangers. The song's success, his musical depth, and passion were noticed by the executives of Capitol Records. And in 1965, Merle was signed to Capitol Records on the condition that Fuzzy Owen become his manager. Capitol agreed, and the label's investment paid off almost immediately. Haggard released Swinging Doors in 1966, which became a honky-tonk anthem. Around this time, he officially formed his legendary backing band, which he named The Strangers, a group so tight and talented they could switch from pure honky-tonk to western swing to country ballads without missing a beat. They were an integral part of the Haggard sound. It was in this era that Haggard's personal history began bleeding directly into his songwriting. He released Branded Man in 1967, an unflinching song about the stigma of having a prison record. It struck a chord with listeners, going to number 1 on the country charts and making it clear that Haggard was willing to sing about the things Nashville tended to avoid. A year later came Mama Tried, a semi-autobiographical masterpiece about a rebellious son who ignores his mother's good intentions and ends up in prison. The song became an anthem for anyone who had lived through hard choices and hard consequences. It was later preserved in the Library of Congress's National Recording Registry for its cultural significance. Then, in 1969, Haggard released Okie from Muskogee. Written partly as a lighthearted jab at the hippie culture of the time, it was embraced by many as a patriotic, anti-counterculture anthem during the height of the Vietnam War. Haggard himself claimed it was more of a character sketch than a personal manifesto, but either way, it became one of his defining songs. That year, he won the CMA Song of the Year award, proving his place as a significant voice in American music. Throughout the 1970s, Haggard dominated the charts and topped the list, with songs like The Fightin' Side of Me, Workin' Man Blues, and If We Make It Through December. Haggard became the voice of country music. He was more than just another hitmaker, but was gradually shaping the direction of country music. He brought Western swing influences into the mainstream, recorded entire tribute albums to Jimmy Rogers and Bob Wills, and experimented with jazz-inflected arrangements. He toured relentlessly, often more than 200 shows a year. This forceful drive in his music earned him a reputation as one of the hardest-working artists in the business. In 1970, the Country Music Association named him Entertainer of the Year, a fitting acknowledgement of his dominance. Things began to change drastically in the country music world during the 1980s. Country music tastes were shifting. The urban cowboy trend leaned towards slicker production, and Haggard's brand of grit and truth-telling didn't always fit the mold. Still, he adapted without losing his core style. He signed with MCA Records and later Epic Records, scoring hits like Big City and Are the Good Times Over? He also teamed up with Willie Nelson for the duet album Pancho and Lefty in 1983. The title track shot to #1 and introduced Haggard to a new, younger audience. In 1984, there was no doubt that Haggard had become one of Nashville's music legends. He was inducted into the Nashville Songwriters Hall of Fame, further solidifying his place among the all-time greats. As the 1990s rolled in, mainstream radio was giving more airtime to newer country stars, but Haggard's status as a legend was unshakable. He was inducted into the Country Music Hall of Fame in 1994, an honor that celebrated not just his hits, but the authenticity he brought to the genre. Haggard continued recording and touring, often teaming up with other icons like George Jones and Brooks and Dunn. His concerts during this era were part music and part storytelling. Fans came not just for the songs, but to hear the man himself reflect on a lifetime of ups and downs. In the early 2000s, Haggard experienced a creative revival. Albums like If I Could Only Fly received critical acclaim, proving he could still write with the depth and honesty that had defined his career decades earlier. He was awarded a Lifetime Achievement Award at the Grammys in 2006, and in 2010, he received the Kennedy Center Honors, recognizing his cultural impact on America. Haggard never slowed down, even in his 70s. He continued to tour and record, collaborating with artists across genres. His 2015 reunion album with Willie Nelson, Django and Jimmy debuted at #1 on the Billboard Country Albums chart, a testament to his enduring relevance. Even as his health declined due to lung problems and bouts of pneumonia, he insisted on performing. His last concerts took place in early 2016, and despite being visibly ill, he delivered performances with the same grit and authenticity that had carried him through decades. Personal life. Just like his early life, Merle Haggard's personal life was also full of complexities. Married when he was barely 20, his first marriage set the stage for the most wrenching contradictions of his life. It was just a year before he went to jail that he married Leona Hobbs. He was still a teenager turned young man, scrabbling for work and meaning. Not long after they wed, Leona became pregnant with their first child, Dana. She was born in 1957. The year Merle's life took a drastic turn into the legal trouble that led to San Quentin prison. Leona and Merle had 3 more children, Marty, Kelly, and Noel. But those early years were chaotic. Between his arrests, a jail sentence, and an escape attempt that landed him in San Quentin in 1958, Merle was frequently absent. The result was a marriage strained by absence and the relentless pressure of poverty and a budding criminal record. Their marriage ended in the mid-1960s. Marty, his son, later reflected on that emptiness, saying in interviews that his father wasn't always the parent he wished he'd had. But even in those fractured beginnings, music was quietly seeding itself into the family. After the end of his marriage to Leona, Bonnie Owens came into his life. She was the partner who helped raise his kids and shape his sound. When Merle married Bonnie Owens in 1965, it changed everything about how his life and career progressed. Bonnie, already an established country singer who had previously been married to Buck Owens, was both a romantic partner and a practical ally. She toured with him, sang harmony, and held Merle's music together. She transcribed lyrics, helped shape arrangements, and steadied the household. Their partnership was both creative and domestic. As his star rose, Bonnie often stood beside him while touring with Capitol Records and The Strangers. But the touring life took its toll. By the mid to late 1970s, strains that came from relentless road schedules, money pressures, and Merle's hard edges eroded their marriage. They divorced in 1978, though they remained closely linked professionally for years afterwards. Bonnie continued to sing with him on and off, and the warmth between them stayed on a human level even after the legal marriage ended. Almost immediately after his split from Bonnie, Merle's life intersected with Leona Williams, a singer-songwriter who eventually became his third wife. Leona had already carved a modest career of her own, joining Merle's touring life and singing with The Strangers. Most importantly, she wrote songs that became hits for him. 2 of Merle's #1, Someday When Things Are Good, and You Take Me for Granted, bear Leona Williams' writing fingerprints. Her perspective as a songwriter and harmony vocalist became woven into the Haggard sound for those years. Her talents and hard work sparked a deep desire for marital commitment in the heart of Haggard, and in 1978, they got married. Their marriage was creative and public. She was a fixture in his band and on stage. However, the relationship also revealed a pattern that had shown up before. Merle's life on the road and his mercurial temperament could strain even loving partnerships. By 1983, their marriage had hit a rock. Leona faded back into her career afterward, continuing to write and perform while Merle moved on as usual. Following the end of his marriage to Leona Williams, Merle married Debbie Parrott in the mid-1980s. Unlike his second and third marriages, this one received less press coverage. It was often described as quieter, more private, and more companionable in a functional sense. The marriage lasted into the early 1990s. Though it did not produce children who would later be publicly associated with his band, it was part of a string of relationships in which Merle tried to find balance between the demands of touring and a desire for steadiness at home. By Merle's admission, the marriage was partly born of convenience and companionship. That pattern of searching for steadiness while being pulled by career demands left its mark on his family life. His children from the first marriage were growing up through the 1970s and 1980s at different paces. Some leaned into music, some chose different paths, and the reality of the road always tempered Merle's ability to be a present father. Eventually, his marriage to Debbie Parrott ended, pushing him more into the business of music. The Strangers still toured, and Merle continued to write and record songs that spoke to an audience who felt he voiced their struggles. Merle's fifth marriage to Teresa Ann Lane, which began in 1993, was by all accounts the most enduring and, in many ways, gave him peace in his adult life. Teresa was younger than Merle and came into his life when he was a seasoned star. Although older and more reflective, Merle at this point was finally ready for a quieter domesticity. They married in September 1993 and stayed together until he died in 2016. The couple had two children together, Janessa and Ben, who later became the youngest generation in the Haggard musical lineage. The arrival of Janessa and Ben, late in Merle's life, allowed him a different kind of fatherhood. It gave him the privilege of spending time with his children, something he'd missed with the older children. Ben in particular followed directly into his father's musical orbit. He joined the Strangers as lead guitarist at age 15, learning the ropes on stage from the man whose songs he'd grown up hearing. Janessa chose a more private path, pursuing nursing and creating a life largely outside the public eye. Across those 5 marriages, Merle fathered 6 children who appear in most reliable biographical accounts: Dana, Marty, Kelly, Noel, Janessa, and Ben. The children's relationships with their father evolved over decades. The early kids, in particular, remembered an uneven childhood, shaped by their father's absences and the instability of his early life. By the time Merle married Teresa and had Ben and Janessa, he was a man who'd been publicly, legally, and artistically shaped by his past. Touring with his family, inviting his sons and daughters into the band, and simply showing up at more family events were the slow, lived ways he tried to be the father he hadn't been. Ben's development into a professional musician within his father's band is one of those rare stories where a large, famous parent passed a craft directly and lovingly to the child. Merle's private life was never tidy. He was a man of contradictions. A father who'd been absent and then painfully present. A husband who cycled through relationships, yet ultimately found a steady partner in Teresa. A son of Dust Bowl migrants who became a symbol of working-class country music. His marriages were chapters that overlap with the songs he wrote and sang. Each wife added a different color to his life. The large and sometimes messy arc of Merle Haggard's personal life was a work in progress. His early faults and absences left scars that required decades to soothe, and in several ways, his music became how he tried to explain and atone. Merle Haggard's health challenge and death. Merle Haggard was known for his rugged lifestyle, decades on the road, countless performances, and a lifetime of hard living that included smoking, drinking, and the stress of touring. By the early 2000s, his health had already begun to show signs of deterioration. Friends, family, and close associates reported that Merle would cough during conversations, and he sometimes seemed short of breath after performances. While he didn't make a big public fuss about his health at first, Merle quietly sought medical advice in the mid-2000s. That's when doctors began warning him about the potential damage to his lungs. He knew immediately that his substance use, smoking, and drinking were starting to take a toll on his health. But sadly, Merle didn't quit those dangerous habits. In November 2008, during a routine medical checkup, doctors discovered a suspicious spot on his right lung. The devastating news of a possible cancerous infection in his lung left Merle traumatized, especially given that his father had died of a brain hemorrhage when Merle was just 9, and health-related loss had always been a quiet fear in his life. A few days later, it was confirmed that Merle had non-small cell lung cancer. Rather than letting the illness slow him down, Merle faced it head-on. In December 2008, he underwent surgery at the Bakersfield Memorial Hospital to remove part of his lung. The procedure was successful. Doctors believed they had caught the cancer early, and Merle was back performing within weeks. Fans were amazed to see him on stage so soon, and Merle himself said the surgery gave him a new outlook on life. However, while the cancer was removed, his lungs had already been weakened, making him more vulnerable to future illnesses. In the years that followed, Merle developed chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, COPD. It is a long-term condition that makes it hard to breathe, often caused by smoking and lung damage. COPD meant that even a mild cold or infection could easily turn into something far more dangerous for him. By 2015, Merle often needed oxygen therapy, and his touring schedule had to be adjusted. His voice remained strong and soulful, but between songs, he sometimes paused to catch his breath. Merle fell seriously ill in December 2015. What began as fatigue and a persistent cough quickly escalated into severe breathing difficulties. He was diagnosed with double pneumonia, an infection in both lungs. This was extremely dangerous for someone with COPD and a history of lung surgery. Merle spent his 2015 Christmas and New Year mostly in hospitals and recovery centers. He attempted to return to touring in early 2016, but doctors repeatedly warned him that pushing himself could be fatal. His health forced him to cancel several shows, but he continued to reassure fans he would be back soon. Despite doctors' warning, he returned to his rigorous schedules, and in March 2016, pneumonia returned. This time, it was even harder for his body to fight off. The infection, combined with his COPD, put immense strain on his weakened lungs. Merle spent much of his last month in palliative care at his ranch near Palo Cedro, California, surrounded by his wife, Teresa, and his children. Having had fulfillment in his career and united with his family, Merle was reportedly at peace with his fate. Friends said he often spoke of faith, family, and music in those last weeks. He even joked about writing songs in heaven. The report says that Merle had told his family more than once that he believed he would die on his birthday, and that was precisely what happened. On 6th April 2016, his 79th birthday, Merle Haggard passed away due to complications from pneumonia. News of his death spread instantly across the music world. Country stars like Willie Nelson, Dolly Parton, and Loretta Lynn paid heartfelt tributes. Fans shared stories of how Merle's songs had shaped their lives. Merle's death marked the end of a 6-decade career that saw him record over 70 albums, earn 38 #1 hits, and become a cultural icon. His struggles with illness in his final years never diminished his artistry. They seemed to deepen the emotional weight of his later performances. Even in death, Merle's music continued to chart, proving that his voice would never be forgotten. His life story, from prison inmate to country music legend, remains one of the most remarkable transformations in American music history. Merle Haggard's net worth. The rags to riches story of Merle Haggard only became a reality as a result of his grit and an unwavering dedication to his craft. His net worth at the time of his death in 2016 was often estimated at around $40 million, but those figures only scratched the surface. To understand that number, let's take a step back in time and see how the twists and turns in Haggard's life brought him closer to financial stability. When Merle finally left prison, determined to change, he didn't immediately step into stardom. He worked odd jobs, played small honky-tonks, and made a few dollars here and there. His first authentic taste of professional earnings came in the early 1960s when he began performing regularly in Bakersfield and started recording. Songs like Sing a Sad Song and My Friends Are Gonna Be Strangers brought him modest royalties, nothing extravagant, but enough to move him out of survival mode. The real financial turning point came in the late 1960s and 1970s when Haggard became one of country music's most bankable stars. Albums like Branded Man, Mama Tried, and Okie from Muskogee made him money. Concert tours during this era were lucrative, and royalties from both radio airplay and album sales began to accumulate. By the mid-1970s, Merle was earning high-performance fees, making television appearances, and enjoying consistent royalty checks. Even as his income soared, Merle faced the same pitfalls that often trip up stars. The multiple divorces he had meant expensive settlements and division of assets. He also battled with tax issues. At one point, the IRS pursued him for unpaid taxes, forcing him to work even harder to settle debts. His love of ranching and owning multiple properties also tied up large sums of money in maintenance and upkeep. Despite setbacks, Haggard was smart about diversifying his wealth. He invested in ranch land, livestock, and publishing rights to his songs. Owning the publishing rights meant he earned money every time his music was played on the radio, covered by another artist, or licensed for television and film. This stream of passive income helped keep his finances stable, even when touring slowed down. In the 1990s and 2000, Haggard continued touring and recording, though at a slower pace. The rise of classic country appreciation meant that his older songs brought in fresh royalties as younger audiences rediscovered them. Tribute albums, collaborations with artists like Willie Nelson, and licensing deals kept the money flowing. By the time of his death in 2016, estimates of his net worth hovered around $40 million. That wealth wasn't just in cash. It included his music catalog, real estate holdings, ranch property, and valuable memorabilia from his decades-long career. Even after his passing, Merle Haggard's estate continues to generate income through royalties, re-releases, and tribute projects. His songs are timeless, and as long as people play them, the revenue stream remains alive. What have you learned from this touching story of Merle Haggard's legendary life? Kindly share with us in the comments and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Hit the like button and share. Take a few minutes to go through the other videos here before you leave.